Phil, Yogacharya Ellen O'Brien, somebody I just met today. You've known her for a while. Wonderful, really clear thinker. When did you first meet her?
When I was researching American Veda, and I was researching the Yogananda chapter of it, I came across, well, I had known about it, but I knew I had to interview Roy Eugene Davis, who's one of the few remaining living direct disciples of Yogananda. And in talking to him, he told me about Ellen and what she was doing with this center in San Jose. So I reached out to her as well,
Right.
and interviewed her and got to know her. And turns out her husband and I went to the same high school in Brooklyn, and
Wow.
we became friends. And I've done presentations up at the center and so
Where is the
forth.
center located?
In San Jose.
Oh, San Jose. I also, for people listening in, I mean, there are different groups that have continued the teachings of Yogananda, hers being one of them. And I guess she got connected through Roy Eugene Davis. She considers him actually her guru in that
Yes.
lineage. And but it seems that the different groups I've been exposed to all seem to pretty much teach something very similar or the same.
Yes, and we'll have representatives from the Self-Realization Fellowship, which is the one Yogananda himself started and is the primary one and the largest. And, that we'll have that represented on the podcast soon as well.
Give me a little clarification on Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga isn't something that Paramahansa Yogananda sort of invented or cognized, but Kriya Yoga, are there many different groups teaching it and there are a lot of similarities, or is it more of a generic term?
Yeah, it's a little confusing because people associate it mostly with Yogananda because he was so well known and essentially brought it his teachings to the West in that name. But as Uma said, it's really a generic term. Kriya means action. So people have called their methods and their orientation Kriya Yoga, who have nothing to do with Yogananda and his lineage, just because you could take actions to advance your yoga and use practices, and you could call them kriyas. So it's kind of a generic term, but as a kind of, I hate to use this word, but as a brand, it's mostly associated with Yogananda and the particular methods that he brought to the West. And in his autobiography, he would say that, or he did say that, Kriya Yoga in this tradition was lost for a long, long time when the legendary master Babaji, the ageless guru who appears from time to time to select people, came to Lahiri Mahasya, Yogananda's guru's guru, and said, "You are the guy to revive these teachings." And so he did, as a householder in Varanasi, or Benares then. And then he passed it to others, who passed it to others. And then there was Yogananda, who became the principal carrier of these teachings to the rest of the world.
Right. I have some familiarity with Self-Realization Fellowship. I've lived for months at a time in Encinitas, which are big facilities there. And what I notice is when you go into their temple or any of their facilities, and I also noticed that on Yogacharya Ellen O'Brien's website, there are 5 or 6 pictures on the wall. Explain to our listeners and to me what those pictures are, who they are, and how they relate to one another.
Yeah, I should say that if our listeners are interested in Yogananda and his lineage, in addition to the literature that's available easily online, they should take a look at the documentary Awake, The Life of Yogananda, which is essentially a filmic biography of him that's now available on DVD. And that explains the lineage very well.
Right. And
But
also, if you haven't read Autobiography of a Yogi,
yeah,
read it. Yeah.
that definitely, that's the principal source. But if you go to different lineages, you'll see different pictures.
Oh, really?
But the ones you will always see are Babaji as a painting or drawing of Babaji as he appeared to Yogananda, and Lahiri Mahasya, Sri Yukteswar, who was Yogananda's guru, and Yogananda. At Center for Spiritual Enlightenment, you will also see a picture of Roy Eugene Davis. At Self-Realization Fellowship, you will also see pictures of Krishna and Jesus. And so since that's what most people would be familiar with, is the altar that Self-Realization Fellowship uses, which has those pictures depicted, and that's considered essentially the lineage.
Right. And my understanding, and I assume it's like this with the Center of Spiritual Enlightenment, that the groups associated with Yogananda generally don't go out and do too much proselytizing or trying to win disciples over, but more they make themselves available and really you find them. I mean, they'll outreach if you're interested, but basically they're not aggressively marketing themselves.
That's very true. It's true of SRF. It's true of the Ananda people. It's true of the smaller lineage that Uma represents at CSC. I mean, you'll see ads in papers and all that sort of thing, but the Autobiography of a Yogi still sells thousands of copies a year, and people are very aware of him. So if they're interested in pursuing the teachings he brought, they will find their way to one of the centers in their area or nearby. And but you're right, they don't proselytize much. They're not out there aggressively, seeking disciples. They have centers and temples and so forth, and it's available.
Great. Well, wonderful interview, Yogacharya Ellen Obrian.
Let me add something, Dennis, about Ellen and the center in San Jose. It's quite a remarkable accomplishment, and I want to, even though she's a friend, I'm being objective. It's a remarkable thing they've got going in San Jose. This combination of the kind of congregation or house of worship congregation we associate with churches and synagogues and mosques, and the service orientation they do, and the different ministries and the pastoral work that we associate with ministry. They do all that, and at the same time, they're teaching their forms of meditation and their forms of devotional practices and yoga classes and studies, and they're training people to perform different functions. So it's quite a community phenomenon, and because it's in the yoga tradition, as opposed to one of the Judeo-Christian traditions, it's actually very diverse. So the people there, they might be Jews, they might be people who identify as Christians, people who identify as Jews, people who identify as none of the above, people who just identify as yogis, and so it's quite an interesting example of how Eastern teachings and have integrated into Western life in a graceful way. And Ellen herself just was given an award by the Hindu American Foundation. It's the Mahatma Gandhi Award for the advancement of religious pluralism. So it's just, I wanted to single them out as one example of many where East and West really do combine in a very integrated way, and where religious diversity, spiritual diversity, is honored in a way that is not superficial.
Mm-hmm. So if you're in the San Jose area, it might be a good idea to visit. And again, if you need information on any of this, you can email Phil and I. Our information is at the podcast, www.spiritmatterstalk.com. Well, Phil, good one. Till next time.
Okay, see you next time, Dennis.